Hi, friends. Welcome to our little makeup session. And thank you so much for being so patient with last week. I got back from the retreat and I laughed and laughed when I thought about coming to do to do this on Tuesday morning. I was like, are you crazy? Because I'd sort of been talking nonstop for 5 days and processing a lot and just recognized that it would be the best for all of us if we waited a week. And so now I've had a week of restoration. And I was just saying to Wyo, it's so wonderful for me to get to do these planets and poetry sessions because I sort of choose the subjects as I go, feeling into what might be good to talk about. As you can see, it's in no particular order, but I choose these subjects, and Chiron today is perfect somehow. And as I was like really steeping in it and thinking about it and meditating about it over the past few days, I was like, of course I chose Chiron. This is the perfect comet / planetoid to talk about. So we're gonna definitely dive into that. Let's just for a moment though. You know what I want to do right away is I want to tell you just about a couple of things that are brewing and going to be coming up. The first one is March 30th with Ellen Fondler. We are going to do a day-long retreat in Malibu in a beautiful house near the ocean. And we're going to be talking about, we're doing astrology and designing your life. And so Ellen will be bringing in ideas about how we can design our lives and unfold the next years of our lives in more harmony with who we are and what we want to give. And I'll be inserting all your personal astrology as we go to help you figure out how to do that. So it's going to be a lovely restorative day. And that's all on my website, hairos.com/events. And then I also wanted to plant the seed, which I feel particularly excited about as well, that on April 13th, I'm going to be doing a poetry reading / talk. And most likely it'll be downtown Los Angeles. We haven't completely solidified the location, but it will be April 13th in the evening. The moon will be in Leo. It will be very festive. I'll be sharing lots of good poetry and there'll be a great little community gathered. And it's just, I think, a lovely way to spend a Saturday night. And I want to be doing more of these talks sort of more regularly. So we're launching this on April 13th. Also planting the seed that I just did get back from this last Radiant Life retreat at 1440 with men and women. It really was an exquisite experience. And now the next one will be in October. Again, I don't have the exact dates yet, but just loosely think to yourself, October, perhaps I'll save that month. And I'll let you know as soon as I can, all right? So I'm gonna share the screen with you. And we're just going to take a peek at this moment. So here we go. So this is this moment. It's actually 9:59, right before I got on. But we're in this double Gemini time. And, you know, as I wrote my moon note this morning, I was like, I was relieved to see Gemini. and that's interesting for me because that's not one of the signs that I'm most en rapport with usually. But something about Gemini, I feel like we've been in this very Piscean time. I mean, look at all this Pisces up here and Mercury's retrograde and everything's internal and it's very, so much feeling, the waves, we're riding the waves of Pisces. And there's something relieving about the Gemini to, you know, as I wrote in the moon note this morning, to be able to give voice, to articulate, to use language, to connect outwardly. That's like, okay, here we go. We can get out of our own heads. We can get out of our own loops. We can get out of our own, whatever it is, self-criticism, fear, all of that. And we can sort of articulate, we can articulate that, and we can also reach out and say, hey, how are you? How have you been? This has been a crazy week. You know, I got here late this morning. And so Wyo and I only had about like 7 minutes to catch up with each other. And we're like, how are you? How are you? And it was a little bit like, wow, it's been a week. But to start to find language that allows us to feel connected and allows us to feel calmer because we feel connected. And we have been, with Pisces, and even with the moon in Taurus, and even with Mars in Taurus, there's been something, quieter about the pace. And there's something lively about Gemini that can sometimes feel like, needed that. So we're in double Gemini right now, and we're going to have a lively conversation about Chiron. Actually, you know what I should do? I'm going to bring up the chart about where Chiron is, because that's what we're going to be talking about all day. So it seems important that we at least acknowledge that. So give me a minute and I'll do that. I wonder if I can do that. I just need the asteroids, and I'm not seeing it somehow. Oh wait, Chiron design. What in the world is that? Let's see. Well, Chiron's in that. All right, we'll use it. We'll use it because it says Chiron design. I've never used that design before. Okay, so just for fun, we're gonna weave in here that Chiron. Here's Chiron. That's important. That's the little K with the little circle under it, and I'm gonna tell you all about it. But Chiron is in Aries, and it just moved in, and it's in the 11th house. So even that's interesting for us, because of course the 11th house is our group, is our gathering, is our little community. And Chiron in Aries, the wound is around coming forth and sharing your ideas and daring yourself in whatever terrain it is. So Chiron has been in Pisces for quite a chunk of time. And it just moved into Aries. I should know when, but it was relatively recently. It's only at 1 degree Aries. So we're going to be talking a lot about that, because Chiron will spend a fair amount of time. It can spend up to 10 years in Aries and Pisces. It spends more time in certain signs than others, and I'll explain why. But so we've got a little bit of Chiron action here. I suppose the other thing to point out about this current time is that we do still have this Piscean collection of Neptune, Sun, Mercury. We're still a little dreamy. We're still seeking inspiration. We're still listening. We're still trying to sort out the feeling life. We're working more intuitively. I mean, even Jupiter in Sagittarius is intuitive. There's something about like following the foresight, following the intuition that's really important. So we're kind of feeling our way through here. We can be doing a lot of great work now in groups with Venus in Aquarius. We can be doing a lot of it can feel good to gather, again, almost as an antidote to all that Pisces. Our Pisces tendency is going to be to hide. Our Pisces tendency is going to be like, leave me alone, I'm closing the door. But thankfully, we have this antidote of Venus in Aquarius that says, oh, wait, it actually feels good to bring my emotional self into the realm of community, and dare to be seen in that way. So it's a nice little balance there. I just looked up and saw this beautiful, it was like a seagull fly overhead, a symbol of freedom. I also, by the way, I'm being very Gemini, I'm just leaping all over the place. I also had the best dream 2 nights ago where I was in a big room with high ceilings, and I jumped up and I could touch the ceiling, and then I didn't have to come down again. So I was really like flying. It was one of those gorgeous flying dreams. And then I discovered that I could be sideways and I could be flying, and it never had to touch. And there was something about this freedom, about never having to touch the ground, that was so relieving to me and so like joyous to me. And it was one of those dreams or experiences that sort of stays in the body, and you're like, oh, thank you, almost like a little blessing that comes in and relieves you of, or relieves me of, some of the heaviness or some of the, feet on the ground, burden carrying, whatever it is. It's like, up, up, up. So anyway, that's maybe even a little bit of Pisces there, that feeling of dream and release. This is worth pointing out too. Here's Saturn and here's Mars. And, you can start to note, you can start to test yourself around aspects, right? So we see they're connected by a trine, a triangle there. And we can tell that they're connected by a triangle or by 120 degrees because we see 18 degrees Capricorn, 17 degrees Taurus. Those are both earth signs. All elements are 120 degrees away from each other. So every earth sign is 120 degrees away from each other. So we know that Mars is trine Saturn because of the degree 18, 17, and because they're in two earth signs, right? So there's a steadiness that comes in here. And actually, this is another sort of balancing agent where we can feel like we're moving slowly and deliberately, but concretely. What we build lasts. We can slow down, but we are on purpose and we're strong. That trine is very, very helpful. So it's an interesting dance right now because there's plenty of air right now, which is about exchange. There's plenty of the internal life of Pisces, but there's also this kind of like slow and steady, deliberate action that we can benefit from. Good. Okay. So, and of course, for us right now, just for fun, Jupiter's in Sagittarius in the 7th house of connection, of collaboration, of communication, of relationship. And Sagittarius is always the sign where we're learning new spiritual things and we're growing and we're stretching. And Sagittarius is the sign deeply connected to Chiron, actually. Chiron is deeply connected to the sign of Sagittarius. All right. So here's how we're going to begin. I want to read you just a couple poems that I feel are all reflective of Chiron. And one of them I just read to you in the last podcast, but I have to read it again because of the one line that is so Chiron, there's not a better line. So, and it's a short poem. And this is the one that's called The Real Work. And it's by Wendell Berry. And it says, "It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings," right? The impeded stream is the one that sings. And that is Chiron. That line is Chiron, because wherever Chiron is where we are impeded or wounded or feel broken from childhood or feel extra sensitive. And yet it's also the place of great singing and great healing. And it's almost as if we have to embrace the imperfection of that point and weave it in to our superpower, like weave it into our healing capacity. Yeah, I'm going to say more about that. But I'm going to read you another poem by Rilke, another very beautiful Chiron poem as far as I'm concerned. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing widens the space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the cup tastes bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroad of your senses. Be the meaning revealed there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. I kind of like the overlap, which I didn't really notice before, of the impeded stream is the one that sings, and this idea that to the rushing water speak, I am. Like you go with the current, you go with the flow. You don't stay in the stuck place. You don't let the stuck place prevent you from growing. You cradle, you nourish, you tend to, you acknowledge the stuck place, you acknowledge the pain, but you don't let it stop you. The river flows on. The river of your life, the river of your love flows on. And as it flows, it gains momentum and splash and joy and freedom. So, you're starting to get a texture for Chiron. It also says, Chiron is definitely, as you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. Because you're going to go back and forth with Chiron. You're going to go into the wound, and then you're going to go into the healer. And then you're going to be in the healer, and suddenly you're going to feel the wound. It's going to go back and forth. So also that line, if the cup tastes bitter, turn yourself to wine. So again, it's like, oh, this doesn't taste good. Oh, this feels terrible. And yet we allow ourselves with a lot of self-forgiveness to be in the transformation, to be in the one that is transforming, to be the one that is transforming, and to continue. I'm going to read you one more. And this one is, I don't know, I just love it. It's a Mary Oliver, but it's a very unusual Mary Oliver. And I think it speaks to the both and. I think it speaks to the wound and to the healer. And it speaks to how we just continue moving forward, holding both. And the poem is simply called For Example. Okay, the broken gull, let me lift it from the sand. Let me fumble it into a box with the lid open. Okay, I put the box into my car and started up the highway to the place where sometimes not, such things can be mended. The gull at first was quiet. How everything turns out one way or another, I won't call it good or bad, just one way or another. Then the gull lurched from the box and onto the back of the front seat and punched me. Okay, a little blood slid down. But we all know, don't we, how sometimes things have to feel anger so as not to be defeated? I love this world, even in its hard places. A bird, too, must love this world, even in its hard places. So even if the effort may come to nothing, you have to do something. It was, generally speaking, a perfectly beautiful summer morning. The gull beat the air with its good wing. I kept my eyes on the road. Isn't that so good? I just love that poem. I don't know, it just cracks me open. I mean, I saw a seagull once on a beach that was just covered in nets and wire or fishing, whatever. And I just didn't know what to do. I just had so much fear. I froze. I should help him. And I didn't do anything ultimately, and I still think about that, right? But even the fact that she took the time, she wrangled this little being into her back seat, and this little being afraid and needing to fight, and we're all that little being, we're all that little bird in the back seat, like going, are you helping me or not? And maybe you're not helping me, so I'm going to keep my defenses up, and then we settle into something where we feel, like, I will let you help me. And but we don't know how it's going to turn out. Yeah. I don't know. I'm so emotional. I've been emotional all week. I've been like riding the wave of tears and, rage. And it's the journey, friends. It's the journey of being human. So it's perfect that we're going to talk about Chiron. So Chiron, a presentation by Heidi Rose Robbins. I'm being silly. Okay, Chiron. Chiron is actually, I always call it a planetoid. It's kind of a comet. It's kind of an asteroid. But it was discovered, believe it or not, only in 1977. So really not long ago, like 40 years ago. And that's interesting already, because that means that really it's only the last 40 years that astrologers have been saying, well, what could this stand for? What could this mean? How could this affect us? Its orbit is between Uranus and Saturn. It's like in between, and it's an oval orbit. It's erratic. So like I said, it spends like 20 years in Aries and Pisces, and then it spends less time in other signs, because it's a 50-year orbit. So that's interesting already, because that means that at 50 or 51, we have what's called a Chiron return, which is a pretty profound cracking open and a pretty profound healing time, and an opportunity to face what hasn't been healed and step forward into the healing, and step forward even more as the healer, and to sort of redeem the parts of ourselves that we have somehow left behind, if we haven't addressed it to that point. If we have been addressing it, then perhaps the Chiron return might be a little less dramatic. But if not, it really presents itself like the wound presents itself, and we say, gosh, are we going to proceed with the second half of our life with this wound as intense, or are we going to actually live into the healing? So you hear me using a lot of the wound and the healer, and Chiron is the wounded healer, and it is where we uncover our deepest pain and our greatest healing. And it really represents our journey to heal the wounds. So what's very interesting about Chiron is that wherever it is in our charts, we tend to be the teacher there. Like, we teach the wisdom of that placement, and yet we can't so much understand it for ourselves. Okay, that takes a minute to like grok, right? So we are like, oh, let me talk to you about your self-worth, and let me talk to you about how beautiful you are, and let me share with you how, you should spend your money on beautiful things and surround yourself with beauty, and talking about Chiron and Taurus, right? But at the same time, we might not be able to translate or understand that language for ourselves. We might be very careful and cautious about how we spend money, or we might feel that we are not deserving, and we can't understand the wisdom that we so freely give. There's a disconnect. So you can feel how simultaneously we're the teacher and the healer, but we're also incredibly broken there. And so we're trying to heal ourselves by healing others through our wound. All right, it's going to start to make more sense. This idea of imperfection with Chiron, it's where we feel like, oh my gosh, I suck at this. It's where we, it's got a flavor of Saturn, so you're going to hear some Saturn things, but it's the place, it feels just really painful here. And we have to befriend that imperfection. We can't give up on our dream because of the imperfection. We have to still manifest even with the imperfection. So again, that impeded stream is the one that sings, right? We notice it, we say, ow, and we say, and still I move forward. Now, Chiron was named after the centaur, a centaur in Greek mythology, who was the healer and the teacher, but ironically could not heal himself. And there's this beautiful book. This book is quite lovely. It's called The Stars Within You, A Modern Guide to Astrology. It's by Juliana McCarthy. It's a very introductory book, but it's beautifully written and soothing. You're like, that is Taurus. I mean, you just feel very at home or at peace reading it. It's like a very lovely way to learn. But in it, she also has a lovely little part about the myth. And she just says this, I'm going to read it to you. It's just a little paragraph. The Greek myth of Sagittarius is connected to the archer Chiron, who was a gentle and compassionate centaur. While many centaurs lacked intelligence and acted out of violence, Chiron was known for his wisdom and ability to teach. One day, while trying to wipe out other centaurs who were causing problems, Heracles shot Chiron by accident. Finding Chiron suffering and helpless from his venomous arrows, Heracles experienced deep regret and sadness. Chiron was immortal and could not die, although he wanted to, since he was in so much pain. Prometheus stepped in after observing Chiron's struggles and helped elevate him to the heavens, where he would live as the constellation Sagittarius. There, he reminds us of his wisdom, teaching, and gentle might. But this idea that, you know, he cannot die, he has to live with the pain, and he is wise, he is gentle, he is a teacher. So we have to feel that in whatever area our Chiron is located, we have to feel that wise gentleness, that wisdom, as well as the pain. And I think it's important that we recognize it as vulnerability, and vulnerability is not bad. We just recognize it as our vulnerable place and we work on it. And of course, it's, it can be absolutely connected to childhood experience and, childhood wounds, or, the difficulties that can come up in our family dynamics. But we grow out of our childhood, and so too we can grow with and out of those wounds. Something about Chiron that we have to be careful of is that it definitely brings up issues of low self-worth, like that, this whole thing about I'm broken here, right? And it'll never get better. We have to get out of that mindset. Because the wound is so intense, we really have to work to overcome it and to not collapse under it, or to not minimize ourselves or say, oh, we're just so broken. I'm so broken. I'm so imperfect. I'm worthless. You can go there with Chiron. And like I said at the beginning, Chiron is actually this place of incredible inspiration for others. Like, it's part of the area where you can really inspire and uplift others, but somehow there is an inability to breathe in that inspiration for ourselves, at least initially. Okay. So we champion that position. We talk about that position. We teach that position, but we can't apply it to ourselves. Yeah. So I'm going to do right now, what I want to do for you actually is I want to share with you where your Chiron position is, in case you don't know. And let's see how we're going to do this. I've written it up. So I'm going to share where I've written it up. So you look for your name, and there's going to be more. I'm going to move it upward as we go. I'm going to leave it here for a minute, but I've put all of your Chirons. We have a lot of Chiron in Taurus. We have a lot of Chiron in Gemini. So look for your name in that one. I'm going to bring it up to here now. Look for your name there. I'll take a drink of my beautiful chai while you do that. Okay, I'm going to go back again. And obviously, if you're watching this later, you can freeze the screen, but I want to make sure that those of you that are watching now have their positions. And if you don't, why don't you just quickly text WIO if for some reason you don't see your name there. We're all good? Okay. So these are your Chiron positions. And like I said, that's the little K with the circle. Now, you're not going to know right now necessarily what degree Chiron is in. And if you want to know that, I will figure that out for you. You can send me a quick note and I'll send you the degree. I'll do that. Why I was gonna be like, don't do that. It's too much work. But I want you to be able to know the degree. You can also probably look it up on astro.com. But the reason why I want you to know the degree is because I want you to know if it's in relationship to other planets, okay? So for example, well, let's see. I'm just going to bring someone up here. Okay. So the reason why I would want you, for example, to know the degree is that we could say, oh, Alexa's got Chiron at 9 degrees Virgo. And we know now, because it's at 9 degrees Virgo, that it's square the moon. See that square? It's square the moon. It's sextile Jupiter. It's opposite Saturn. And so when I talk a little bit more about the personal planets in relationship to Chiron, it's kind of important to know, is it sitting next to one of your planets? Wyo's got it sitting next to Mars, so that's going to be really important, right? Is it right is it right on the sun? Is it right on the moon? Is it opposite one of those? So it is important to know the degree, and I'm just going to briefly mention that right now in terms of Chiron in relationship to other planets or stars, but then we're going to just simply go into the signs and the house, and at the same time sort of the houses. Okay, so just to say loosely, if Chiron is in a difficult or hard relationship with the sun, and when I say a hard relationship, it could be a conjunction, because we never know with conjunctions whether they're good or bad. It could be a conjunction, it could be a square, it could be an opposition. It also could be a semi-square. A semi-square is 45 degrees away. But let's just say if it's square or conjunct or opposite, sometimes we'll have a hard time expressing creativity, expressing the sun self, being seen as the sun self. We sometimes hide if we have a hard relationship with Chiron and the sun. I'm going to just give you the basics here. Okay, if we have a difficult relationship with Chiron and the moon, which Alexa has here because it's a square, sometimes there would be difficulty or pain in expressing the emotional life or the emotional needs, or there might be awkwardness around expressing what you feel or what you need emotionally. It's like hard to ask for comfort or nourishment. If Chiron is in a difficult relationship with Mercury, you might not feel really great about the way you communicate. You might have a wound about the way you communicate. You might say too much or say too little, or doubt yourself in the way that you communicate. You can see it's just a very simple building block theory. It's like, okay, there's a wound around Mercury, the planet of communication. There's a wound around the moon, the feeling life. Yeah. We can just start with this. If Chiron is in a difficult relationship with Venus, there's a wound around love. There's a wound around maybe never feeling like you never give enough to the partner. There's a wound around maybe feeling like you're not, you don't love yourself enough, right? That you don't value yourself enough, that you give too much to the partner. If there's Chiron and Mars in a difficult relationship, there might be a wound around how you assert yourself or how you deal with bringing up the will or bringing up anger. Right? It might be a wound about how you come forth and claim what is important to you. Yeah. Those are the most important. Those are the personal planets. We could go into the outer planets, but for now, I'm just going to stay with those personal planets. Chiron Saturn would be like a wound around authority, probably, like a wound around how do we trust ourselves or not in the realm of authority, or do we give our power away? And Chiron and Jupiter would be a wound around, I would say, trusting our intuition and trusting our ability to grow. Yeah. And Chiron Neptune, I'm doing it anyway. Chiron Neptune would be a wound around a sense of our imagination, a sense of our artistry. Chiron Uranus would be feeling not accepted, feeling strange, feeling like we don't belong in some way. And Chiron Pluto, it could have a lot of intensity around death and rebirth experiences where, that could be a painful combination, because it could be a real, not knowing if one can really come back from the deaths that occur, in a way, like, am I up for this transformation? Am I up for this ability to die and be reborn? Am I up for this healing journey? So that's the dance with the planets, and that we can get more specific about that. But let's go ahead and dive into the realm of the signs, okay? And I feel about Chiron that this really does require quiet and meditation and contemplation, because we're so good at hiding our vulnerability or hiding our pain. And we have found all these different ways to mask it and deal with it and avoid it, that it really requires a quieting down and a softening of our defenses to name that place, that tender place. But it also requires a quieting down and a softening of our defenses to say, gosh, though, I'm good at encouraging people in this area. I am a teacher in this area. I do have a mastery in this area. I just have to open my arms wide enough to include myself, So I'm going to give you some facts right now, but really it's going to require you deepening into each of these positions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the signs. But remember, as usual, as I go through the signs, they are resonant with the houses. So Aries is resonant with the first house, Taurus is resonant with the second, Gemini is resonant with the third, Cancer fourth, Leo fifth, Virgo sixth, Libra seventh, Scorpio eighth, Sagittarius ninth, Capricorn 10th, Aquarius 11th, and Pisces 12th. So, for example, I have Chiron in Pisces in the 8th house. But what I am going to look at is, if I were listening to myself, I would be listening for Pisces and for Scorpio, because those are the two energies that I have to blend together to understand the potency and pain of my Chiron placement. Yeah? I think that's clear. Okay, I'm going to take another sip, and then we're going to dive in. Let's bring up, just for fun, another chart. Cancel, hang on. So, I'm giving you lots of time to soften. Think. Okay, here we go, just for fun. So here's Anne. And where's Chiron? There's Chiron in Taurus. So again, we see a square to Jupiter, we see a trine to Venus, and we'd want to contemplate that. But just as I was explaining, Chiron in Taurus, in the Capricorn house. So she wants to listen to Taurus and Capricorn. So Chiron in Aries will champion others asserting themselves, and will champion others coming forth with their will. They are great cheerleaders of others daring, and others in being empowered, and others asserting themselves, and others, diving forward. And yet, there is something within that says, but I don't dare come forward. But I can't use my will. I don't have enough will to come forward. I'm afraid of coming forward. When I've come forward previously, I've been hurt, or I've been criticized, or I've been, I've been wounded in some way because I've asserted my will. So Chiron and Aries people, it's very hard to dare and assert. It's very hard to say, I'm going to stand up for myself. You know, they might stand up for everyone else, but I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to prioritize my coming forth with my ideas. That's going to be painful. So there's a wound around your fiery, passionate self. There's a wound around your daring self. And yet you're a healer, you're a champion, you're a teacher of daring. You know, you could be a person that's like, let's go forth, let's do it. Like outwardly, you could be like doing the scary thing. You could be bungee jumping. You could be, you know, whatever it is. You could be daring yourself outwardly, but inwardly, there's a part of you that is like, I'm not strong enough, or I'm not assertive enough, or I won't stand up for myself. Yeah. So it's kind of like having a Marsy wound, right? Because that self-assertion. So the Chiron in Aries, we have to learn to assert the will with a capital W. And that's also Chiron in the first house, the pain of coming forth. The phrase for Aries is, I come forth, and from the plane of mind I rule. And Chiron says, ow, when I come forth, I'm punished, or I'm in pain, or I don't dare. Okay. All right. Chiron in Taurus, or Chiron in the second house. The wound is around your feelings of value. Do you feel valuable? Do you feel worthy? And there's we feel somehow not enough. We feel somehow lacking in our worth when Chiron's in Taurus. And we also perhaps doubt our ability to manifest, or to make tangible, or to make it real. There's also a very interesting thing often that happens with money with Chiron and Taurus people, where there's a tendency that they have to withhold pleasure from themselves, right? So to be very incredibly frugal, or to not spend money, or to be, you know, to not feel worthy of spending the money on themselves. And yet they are the great encouragers of others to feel their worth, to take care of themselves, to nourish themselves, to steep in beauty. They're the great teachers of the beauty of nature, the beauty of replenishment. And yet there's something that says, I don't get to enjoy that. There's a lack. The wound is around lack and around resources and around money, like, and pleasure. I don't get to steep in the beauty, but you steep in the beauty. I'm not worthy of steeping in the beauty. I'm not worthy of these beautiful, luxurious items. You know, you're wonderful at helping another feel their own worth, but no, not for the self. Yeah. So there's something in a very tangible way to be worked out around your relationship with money, but at a deeper level around your own value. But I would imagine that Chiron and Taurus people would be like, you know, come with me, you know, let's take a mountain hike and, you know, sit by the stream and remind ourselves, you know, what we bring to the world, right? I mean, there's something that's like, and let's eat good food and all of that. But there's some kind of lack or deprivation that happens when you enjoy, when a Chiron and Taurus person is actually enjoying themselves. No. Okay. Chiron in Gemini, the wound is, guess what? It's around communication. It's around learning. It's around connection. It's around feeling connected. And like I was saying with Chiron and Mercury, you can talk you might talk constantly out of the wound, or you might seldom speak out of the wound, but you don't feel heard no matter what, right? There's a feeling of like, I'm not connecting. I'm not being heard. There's even a hesitation around being curious, a hesitation around an expression of curiosity. On the other hand, here you are, great with helping others find the information they need, find the advice they need. You'd be great at collecting facts. You'd be great at connecting other people. Your desire to connect and help is really real. you have an ability to inspire others to share their message, and yet there's something that's like, do I dare say that? Or I've said too much, or the guilt around saying too much or saying too little, the back and forth around that. Or once you've spoken, was that really what I wanted to say? Now let me assess that. Yeah. So the wound around how we are connected through language, through sharing our stories. And that's Chiron third house as well. Chiron in Cancer, the wound is around feelings and emotions and belonging. There's a real sense of, do I belong? And a feeling of I don't belong. And where is my home? And a feeling of being alien, and a feeling of not being able to land securely and safely somewhere. There's a big energy around safety with Chiron in Cancer. And the healing, you almost have to create the security for yourself and learn how to create security for yourself, which is going to feel really scary and hard because that's your wound. And you have to overcome the fear to create the security for yourself. And the healing will come as you feel like you've established home for yourself, established your family. The healing will come as you feel more rooted and grounded and in your body, because even Cancer rules the body. So there's something about the body itself that feels like there's tremendous sensitivity or vulnerability. And is it even safe to allow you in, So there's incredible kindness, like you're a healer with kindness, with compassion, with taking care of others, with making others feel at home, and yet you deprive yourself of that very feeling, or you deprive yourself of the sense that you also need to be cared for. Yeah. And you might have issues of truly feeling comfortable anywhere outside your own home that you've established for yourself, right? So then eventually what we all want to do is we want to become the lighted house, right? I build a lighted house and therein dwell, so that wherever we travel, we carry our home, our body, our lighted house with us. But the pain is definitely around, do I belong? Do you understand me? Am I understood? If I'm not understood, am I safe? If I'm not safe, then I should just go back to my own home and not come out again, So it's a very tender placement. And that's Chiron fourth house as well. And, sometimes when you have the fourth house thing, it can be something around family or not feeling safe in the home for some reason, or feeling misunderstood in the home, or not belonging in the family of origin. All of those things can happen. They don't have to, but they're part of the possibility. Okay. Chiron in Leo, the wound is around the expression of your creativity, right? And the wound is around being seen. And you will champion, you will stand up for, you will cheerlead others to be unique, to express themselves, to shine, to not feel guilty about being radiant. And yet you yourself will hesitate around a full out expression of self. And there'll be a lot of self-consciousness and a lot of hesitation. Will you love me if I do this? Then maybe I shouldn't do it because I don't know if you'll love me if I will. So Chiron and Leo people really have to get in touch with children and relearn how to play and relearn how to just let themselves paint and create and experiment, right? So there's just the joy of shining forth and the joy of offering the self with a capital S. And there isn't the wound around being seen as the authentic self. So wonderful, like people with Chiron in Leo would probably be great with, working with kids or working with people in kind of, as art therapists, or getting in there and saying, oh, you can do this. Yes, I want to hear your voice. I want to see what you create. They will heal others in this capacity, but they also have to out themselves, however painful. Yeah. So that's also Chiron in the 5th house. So Chiron in Virgo is, of course, the wound around perfectionism, right? It has to be perfect. And I am imperfect. It's kind of like a double whammy of imperfect, because Chiron already feels imperfect and Virgo easily feels imperfect, right? So there you really feel like there are incredibly high standards that you have to live up to. And it feels very difficult to do so, and incredibly high standards around your work and around your health. So Chiron in Virgo also, you could consider deeply a healer. You know, you could have doctors, nurses, healers that have Chiron Virgo, because they're champions of helping others get healthy, right? But they don't necessarily turn that love and attention to their own health and well-being, because they feel too broken, or they feel too cracked, or they feel like they're just simply not enough. So they don't put enough attention on their own health and well-being. So also Chiron in Virgo has to be very careful about making everything work. Like everything is work, play is work, everything's work. Everything feels like a to-do list, and that we feel like it's never enough work with Chiron and Virgo. And yet somebody with Chiron and Virgo might cheer someone on to create a really healthy schedule that supports their work, but also creates time for them to walk and get exercise and spend time with friends. Like it might create a rhythm or routine. They might really champion a rhythm or routine that serves their health and well-being, whereas they could be completely out of whack in their own, and in their own health and healing. And so they could have healing crises with Chiron in Virgo, or the 6th house. This sense of like, yeah, again, that imperfection thing is just really elevated. Like I'm never going to be organized enough, or healthy enough, or together enough, or, there's just such high expectations for yourself with Chiron and Virgo. So you just have to turn all that devotion of Virgo and true healer energy of Virgo to the self, so that you can tend practically and lovingly and devotedly to the self as well. Okay. Chiron in Libra, or Chiron in the 7th house, the wounding and rejecting is around relationships, of course, right? And it's a flavor of Aries, in the sense that there is something about self-assertion with Chiron and Libra, where there's a codependency, there's a giving over, there's a, I'll leave myself out of the equation. But what Chiron and Libra, and Chiron and Libra are champions for right relationship, and for, standing up for how others are treated and how others create relationship, but they won't do that for themselves. So you have to find the way with Chiron and Libra to insert yourself into the equation, and to feel your own personal strength and your own boundary setting. And as you enter relationship, and then you can build a beautiful relationship, and then you can really stand for right relationship in the way that you relate. You just have to be careful of over giving, right? You give often with Chiron and Libra, you give way more than you receive, which is, it's not bad. It's only bad when it becomes sacrificial, and you're depleted, and you're exhausted, and you're anxious and feeling guilty that it's never enough, right? But you'd also be a great, great counselor, because you can help people build better relationships. Yeah, you could be a marriage and family counselor. Chiron in Scorpio. This is an intense one, Chiron in Scorpio, because the issue is, the wound is around power, and you may fear your own power and try to suppress it or repress it, or you may feel like you're powerless, and you might overcompensate, so you act more aggressive. So the wound is around like, am I strong? Am I powerful? How do I exert this? How do I come forward in my warrior strength? And you'd be great at helping others dive in and strengthen themselves, and go into the heart of who they are, and wrestle the riches to the surface, and feel empowered. But for some reason, The dance with power within the self is a really awkward one. But Chiron and Scorpio, they are great spiritual counselors. They want to investigate the depths with you, sex therapists, death and dying guides, that kind of thing. But the wound with Scorpio is really around how much of my shadow do I dare express, or how much of this underworld do I dare express or bring to the surface? I'll certainly make space for you to do it, but oh no, mine is too ugly, or the power is unwieldy, or I don't know how to wield the power so that I don't hurt someone. So it can really hold back. Or again, like I said, it can overcompensate, and it can be too much, and it can assert too much. But Chiron and Scorpio people really do have to learn how to allow for their feelings and face the sense of loss, because Scorpio is death and rebirth, and Chiron is like, oh, but that's too terrifying. Do I really have to go into that territory for myself, where I might have to really lose something that is meaningful to me in order to take the next step? So, another thing with Chiron and Scorpio is that they really have to dare themselves into that terrain for themselves, not for another, because they'll help another walk that journey in, no problem, but for themselves. They fear losing control. That's a big thing. Chiron and Scorpio, tremendous fear of the loss of control. Chiron and Sagittarius, or the ninth house, the wound is around expressing our true inherent wisdom. We encourage others to travel, to see the world, we teach others so that they expand and grow. We encourage all forms of growth, and yet there's something when Chiron's in Sagittarius that we don't trust our own inner intuition. We don't trust our own inner guide. And so what we really need to do is we need to learn to listen to our inner guidance, and we need to give ourselves as much permission to travel the world and to have unusual experiences, and to seek out inner guidance, our own inner guidance. We need to allow that, instead of perhaps taking on a dogma from childhood, or saying, well, this is the only way. We have to dare ourselves into the terrain of connecting with our higher self, right? In a way, when Chiron's in Sagittarius, we have to learn how to listen within instead of listening without. Instead of listening to something that's imposed on us, into dogma or fundamentalism, or some kind of belief system that isn't ours because we haven't investigated. So there's something about the teacher, the encourager, the uplifter for everyone else, but when it comes to trusting one's own inner guide, it falls short. So you have to trust your own inner guide. You have to trust your own vision of the world, and you have to act on it. You have to have adventures that come out of that inner intuition. You have to act on your own truths. Because Chiron and Sagittarius people really do want to have meaning, and they want to have a connection to something larger than themselves, which at first perhaps they feel like they can't access. But then as they heal, they realize it's within. Chiron in Capricorn is you're not trusting your own authority, right? It's like a Chiron relationship to Saturn. You're not trusting your own authority. You look outside for authority. You try to prove something. Chiron in Capricorn would be like, all right, guys, we're climbing the mountain. Everybody climb the mountain. I'm going to encourage you to climb the mountain. I'm working really hard. I'm asserting. I'm success. I'm controlling the circumstance so that I climb and achieve. And yet inwardly, there's a sense that I don't trust myself. I don't trust my ability to lead. I don't trust my own authority. So in a way, we overcompensate. We need to feel our own sense of self-respect. We need to feel our own sense of inner structure and inner authority. And you create that boundary for others. You create that guide for others. But there's something where you you overdo, you feel overly responsible, you do far too much. You wouldn't expect it of others, but you expect it of yourself. And still, there's something empty where you don't feel your true inner authority. So Chiron and Capricorn people have to find that place where where the wound is around the fear of some external authority judging that what you're doing is not enough, whereas the inner authority has to make the decisions and the action has to come out of the true inner authority. Okay, Chiron in Aquarius. This is an interesting one. Like the wound is probably around expressing your uniqueness or your genius, and sometimes it gets a little bit out of whack because Aquarius can be a little ungrounded, and you have to you have a genius around helping others express their innovation and their uniqueness, and you're like, go, you can do this. It's okay, live outside the box, live freely, do your own thing. But then there's something inward that feels awkward and out of sorts. And how do I share this with my community? And how do I share my genius? And do I dare to come forward? So you have to find the ways to bring your new idea into an older structure. It's like the old and new are always meeting. So you have to find a way to bring the new into the status quo. So you're not completely rejected for your genius or your uniqueness. You can feel really disconnected or not a part of a group when you have Chiron in Aquarius. You have to, it's like, again, where do I belong? Do I belong? But you have to keep showing up in groups as your humanitarian self until you say, here, I can bring myself here. And you have to dare yourself into those situations so you don't isolate yourself and feel like a freak. You know what I mean? We definitely do that to ourselves. We take ourselves out and go like, I don't belong there. I don't belong there. Nobody gets me. Nobody understands me. So there's something about where we have to dare to bring that vulnerability into the group situation and offer that in a grounded way, because the greatest challenge with Chiron and Aquarius is to ground ourselves. Okay. Finally, Chiron in Pisces, or Chiron in the 12th house. This is an interesting one. The wound is around the sensitivity, really. The wound is around connecting with the divine. You can help others surrender to something greater than themselves. You can help others listen to their intuition. This position is often very psychic or very empathic. But there's something with Chiron and Pisces that you feel alone. You feel like you don't know how to step into the stream. There's a lot of forgiveness and empathy and compassion for others, and a willingness to forgive quite easily, but not so much for the self. And again, a great position of a counselor, but you have to again be careful of how much is given versus and where do you abandon your own self-care. And there's something for Chiron and Pisces person that has to listen more deeply and give yourself time and space to listen and feel connected to the universal oneness. Like, it's so important for Chiron and Pisces people to feel connected to oneness. And yet I suppose they have their own version of feeling like I'm alone. I'm not in the stream of things. Yeah. So we really have to, with Chiron and Pisces, we work to keep opening our heart, to keep daring ourselves to surrender, to keep demonstrating compassion, to keep sharing our gifts, and to keep feeling a part of the oneness, not isolated from it. Yeah. Okay, so that was a little romp through Chiron. Maybe first I'll just ask if there are any questions. And okay, yes.
Can you give an example of how a Chiron return manifests in a particular sign and house? Is it just about healing the difficulty of a particular placement?
Yeah, so the question is about a Chiron return and how it might manifest in a particular house. So I'll just say, let's say Anne is having a Chiron return, which she won't for a while, but let's say she's having a Chiron return. Chiron will return to Taurus. Taurus is all about one's self-worth and am I worthy and can I manifest? And Chiron is also in her 10th house of career. So there's going to be a big cracking open and healing around her work in the world and her worthiness, her worth in her work in the world. And there might be pain that has to happen around, no, I'm going to stand up for my value, or I am going to bring my eye for beauty to my work in the world. So it's something very concrete here because it's earthy signs about like, am I going to manifest or not? And really the desire to feel that Taurian sense of worth and inner authority, right? So let's just do another one. Let's pull up another one just with that same example. Chiron returns, you can really feel them because, yeah, it's a heightened time because you sort of, you come to yourself and you're like, do I feel, have I done the work? Have I done the work? So here's another one. Here's Anne. And actually it turns out it's another 10th house, but that's okay. So Chiron in Pisces, that's interesting. So this is again, the healing that has to occur around, do I feel alone or do I really live the sense of oneness? Do I isolate or do I allow myself the connection with the divine that is spiritually satisfying to me? And maybe there's a wound around, I mean, she's a Pisces with Chiron in Pisces. So maybe there's a wound around really allowing herself the divine and the spiritual practices as part of her dharmic offering, as part of her career. You know, this would be an incredibly sensitive being. Anne is a very sensitive being, and giving herself time and space to connect with the spiritual world as a way to be of service, 10th house, as a way to work in the world. You know, it's almost like the spiritual world has to be as tangible as the real world in this chart. And there's going to be a crisis if it's not being honored in that way. Yeah. So she just had her Chiron return, and that would be a really good contemplation around that. Other questions, or we can look at some more people. Hang on. See, I'm not rushing. I'm just gonna quietly bring the chart up. Okay, so Deborah, let's look at Deborah. Okay, so Deborah, this is different. This is Chiron in Aquarius in the 2nd house. So we have the flavor of Aquarius and we have the flavor of Taurus. So Chiron in Aquarius is, you know, the wound around belonging. What group do I belong to? Where do I give my unique genius? Will it be heard? Will it be understood? And I would say, you know, yes. And remember that whole thing about the sun square. So do I dare express myself? Do I dare be seen in my unique genius? And do I value it? 2nd house, right? Do I give value to this particular out of the box way of looking at the world? Yes, I encourage it in everyone else. Yes, I encourage their genius. Yes, I encourage their authenticity, and I build them up and say yes, yes, yes. But do I create space for myself to do that? And so Deborah has also already had her Chiron return. It would be interesting to think about what that was for you at the age of 50 or 51. But it definitely has, it's around the worthiness to belong to your true group at some level. And again, I'm being very, you know, in a way simple about these are meditations that you absolutely have to experience for yourself and feel the heart of it. Here's another one. Just interrupt me if people have questions, okay? So here's Riley, and Riley has Chiron in Gemini in the 7th house. So it's a flavor of Chiron. It's a flavor of Gemini. It's a flavor of Libra. So it's all about relationship, right? And this would be something about communication within relationship. And though, you know, Riley's probably very generous in drawing out her partner, drawing out their partner, it's still, there's a pain inwardly around, am I heard? Am I expressing the full truth? Am I daring to express the full truth? And because Chiron is opposite Saturn as well, for Riley, we have something about one's own inner authority. Do I dare, you know, do I dare stand in my authority in the realm of communication with the other? Will I be heard? Will I be listened to? Am I heard? Am I listened to? And again, the Chiron flavor of the sun, again, that visibility, invisibility thing. But, you know, what's the blessing here? The blessing here is that Riley has actually an incredible way with words and connection and language and healing, healing others through drawing out what they have to say, like the counselor position. And also I would say, because Chiron is in the 7th house, standing up for how we treat each other, standing up for fairness, standing up for equality, all of that. Yes.
What is, how do we heal it? Like, what's the actual practice of healing?
Yeah, how do we heal it? How do we heal it? Well, that's the question, right? And I would say we don't heal it by being punitive towards ourselves. We don't heal it by squashing ourselves. We don't heal it through guilt. We don't heal it through self-attack and self-criticism. We heal it through coming to coming into presence with our own vulnerability. So I'm going to give you an example from my chart. So again, Chiron in Pisces in the 8th house. So I'm a counselor. I help people navigate the depths. I'm intuitive. I can feel the pain in others. I create space and presence for people to feel like they can share their darkness with me and not have it not be judged, and it's not judged. And I want to give a space of safety, and I want to encourage others to feel that they can heal. But when it comes to my own self, I don't allow a lot of room for my feelings to have much, I don't give a lot of space or time to them. And so lately for me, it's just a matter of sitting with them and saying, and trying not to judge the feeling, or trying not to judge the depth of pain or depression or sadness, and just being like, well, that's just part of the human existence. And you being able to feel this and make room for this allows more room for you to be a healer and intuitive and compassionate one in the world. But I'm finally understanding with a lot of tenderness and compassion that I can't just squash the feelings into a little box and say, oh, you don't need, you can just control those. You should be able to control those at this place, right? So that's an example. I see there's another question. Is there? No another question? Okay. So let me read one more poem. Oh, no? Oh, there is a question. Okay.
Can you address how transiting Chiron generally affects the world and its trends?
Can I address how transiting Chiron generally affects the world. You know what? Transiting Chiron is going to crack open whatever planet it touches. So in a worldwide way, right? So if Chiron is lining up with Mercury in our day-to-day chart, there are going to be some painful things expressed. You know, we're going to out ourselves in terms of communications, Like, we have to study this, actually. So we have to study when Chiron is in alignment with a particular planet and say, well, okay, what's the nature of this day? But it's generally going to out the wounding. It's going to generally bring up what has been hidden and have an opportunity for it to be healed. And this is something that now I'm interested in studying more, because I haven't really studied tremendous amount of the Chiron transits in terms of our world events. But it would be fascinating to look at just to decide, okay, what are a couple of major world events, you know, and to find out where Chiron was in the chart of, let's just say, the United States or whatever country you're in, and see if the wound and the healing are simultaneously together, and that you can see where it's devastating, but that it's creating the seeds for growth, you know? So we've just begun to till the soil of Chiron, and I want you to, you know, do some research, dream about it, write, do some intuitive writing about this. I'm going to. I'm going to. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to read you a very short little, another very short little Mary Oliver, okay? Just as a way to affirm the healing. And it's called Don't Hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches of the power in the world. It could be anything, but very like you notice it in the instant when, but you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. So let's not let joy be a crumb. Let's let joy be a big loaf of homemade bread. I'm going to see you again next week. I don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but we're going to talk about something good. And so much love. Glad you were here, and see you very, very soon. Okay. Mwah.